I'm Ramon Scott, and I'm joined by, might I say, the venerable Steve Dolan. Steve, Dolan's Dugout is not a new show. We just thought we'd kind of reincarnate it a little bit in kind of a newfangled form or fashion. How long have you been doing Dolan's Dugout?
Actually, Ramon started Dolan's Dugout in 1977 as a writer for the Desert Sun in Palm Springs. They had me do a weekly column. Started there, it went off for many, many years, and then started back again, 8, 9 years ago with a radio station up in Alpine, and thrilled to be doing it today for EastCountySports.com.
And it makes me so proud to have Dolan's Dugout now as a part of EastCountySports.com, given our relationship and our friendship with Bill Dickens for so many years. I think it just kind of makes it come full circle for me. And now that I've been able to wrangle you away from the Padres season, you said we don't want to get into it too much. We might as the weeks go along, and this team's future is so bright. But we'll talk mostly about high school. You're a Vaquero. I'm a Highlander. So I think we know where this conversation's going. You and I are both voters in the UT poll, and that's a great place to start because you were at the big game last Friday night. Helix upsetting Cathedral, a monumental victory in a way because of the fact that they beat a nationally ranked team and it was such a high-profile matchup, and you were the statistician for Braden Sucrenet and Coach Quintera for the game last week. So talk about the poll in just a moment, but tell me about the game, Steve, the Highlanders' big win over the Dons last Friday night.
Well, Ramon, I thought the biggest thing was Helix jumped on him right away. Traylor had a 62-yard run in the first series for Helix to go up, and Helix just stayed there. That was the thing. Helix took control. Helix kept control. I thought it was interesting, though, because before the game, probably an hour and a half before the game, when I was coming in, I walked by Sean Doyle, Cathedral's coach. I said hi, and he said hi back. But there was something about the look in his eye that said, hey, we better be on our game tonight or we're in trouble, because when you think about it, Cathedral had two big wins against national teams themselves the weeks before. So I think Helix, I'm not going to say that Cathedral is looking past Helix, but Helix came out off a bye, off a loss to a team from Utah, and Helix just said, hey, let's go get this game. And it's funny because you talk about the county poll, Ramon, and as you know, Helix is now number 1. But East County, we've also got Steel Cannon at 5. We've got Grossmont at 8. What I thought was interesting during the broadcast Friday night and behind the scenes, Coach John Quintero, who's been around forever, who's great, and Braden Sucrenet, who, believe me, one day is going to be one of the top play-by-play radio guys in the nation. They were both talking during the game. They both said, hey, if Helix wins this game, we got to vote him number 1. And I was glad to hear that, because I was going to do that anyway, but I don't want anybody to say, he's an East County guy, that's where they're voting him number 1. These guys both are more North County oriented, and they both said during the game, I'm voting Helix number 1. And the way Helix dominated, it's funny because you talk about how Helix dominated on offense and defense, but where did they really dominate? Special teams. I thought their special teams were special.
Yeah, the slot for Washington, he had the 92-yard return that kind of swung the momentum back on the Highlanders sideline after Cathedral got a pair of rushing touchdowns from Hall and got right back in the game. Special teams has kind of been a big factor in Helix Cathedral games in recent memory. And I think really, and I talked to Jim Lindgren before the game, about a week prior to the game, and he kind of said that Cathedral felt that if there really was a team that kind of scared them, even though their ranking had risen to number 9 nationally, number 15 in some of the other polls, that Cathedral was still concerned about El Elyon Noah and Helix. And I think what it really comes down to, Steve, is Cathedral doesn't travel well to that stadium. They just haven't been able to beat Helix at Helix.
Funny you say that, because that has been their history over the years. But now what Helix has to watch for is this Friday, because you come off playing Cathedral, you play the Saints. I mean, when it comes to scheduling, Helix, Cathedral, they schedule tough, and I admire them for that. I mean, the Saints maybe not so much, but then again, we'll find out Friday night. Is Helix going to have a letdown? How good are the Saints? They've been rolling over people, but again, they haven't been playing people of Helix and Cathedral's caliber. So I'm going to be really curious this Friday night to see how that game goes. I mean, if Helix wins, obviously there's no question Helix is number one in the county. If the Saints do, I guess you got to give it to the Saints. But Ramon, more than anything, I think what last Friday probably did for Helix, unless the season goes south, which I don't think it will, no matter what happens this Friday against St. Augustine, I think that game put Helix in the Final Four. I think in the Open Division right now, it's Helix is there with the Saints and Cathedral, and Open Division number 4 is open right now. I'd say that's Carlsbad. But if you're Carlsbad, you want that position, because last year I went to the game when Carlsbad played Cathedral when Carlsbad was number 4, and I don't think they want to do that again.
Well, it's just interesting that, 3 teams from what I like to call the Gauntlet Series with Helix, Cathedral Catholic, and St. Augustine just makes for a great triumvirate of teams that are playing each other with consistency, scheduling each other. They're important games. And don't forget, Helix lost that game to Steel Canyon that, ended up causing a share of that league title between the 3 teams. And given Steel Canyon's number 5 ranking and their undefeated record and the fact that they're hosting Helix in that game next year, could the Grossmont Conference end up with 2 of those 4 teams?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, gosh, when you say that, it gets me fired up. I think it could happen. I think if I could say one thing, though, about the Grossmont Conference, I think we could get Helix and maybe somebody else in. But, Ramon, I just want to talk to administrators for a minute in the Grossmont Conference, if I could. What scares me right now is the way the leagues are. Because, in the Hills League, you've got Helix, Grossmont, Steel Canyon, and Granite Hills. 4 very good teams, but what scares me is the other side of the spectrum. Valhalla's won a couple games this year. They went 0-10 last year. My alma mater, El Cap, is 0-4. If El Cap doesn't beat West Hills and then gets in that league, El Cap's going to go 0-10 or 1-9. I'm just going to call for some relagging here. Is that okay? I mean, okay, in the NFL, there are 4 teams in all 8 divisions. What I would love to see, and this would be about parity, 3 different leagues with 4 teams. First league, Helix, Steel Canyon, Grossmont, Granite Hills. Clearly the superior teams. Second league, I would go with El Capitan, Valhalla, West Hills, and let's add Christian. You could say Christian isn't in the Grossmont district. Christian isn't in the San Diego Unified School District either, but it's in the City League. And then the third league, of course, Santana, El Cajon, Mount McGill, Monte Vista. I just think let's have some parity out here, because one thing we're seeing, even in the NFL now, as you know, this week, there's 2 games where teams are favored by more than 3 touchdowns. That's never happened before in the NFL that I know of. And I hate to see it in high school. I hate to see that when league starts, we're going to have a lot of routes. Let's redo this. Let's do it to 3-4 team leagues where it's even. And I don't think Christian would have a problem being in the Grossmont League. Christian's one of 4 teams in El Cajon, and I don't think they'd mind having their league rivals be in El Cajon instead of somewhere up in the city or North County or whatever the case might be. And I don't think they'd mind not to play Cathedral every year. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, there was one year the Grossmont League football, and I don't remember. Maybe you did too. The circumstances that were surrounding that, I'm sure Bill would have been able to tell us what transpired to make that happen. But it was just a 1-year experiment, if I'm not mistaken.
It was, and I just wish, again, it's kind of too bad when you get in the league, when the Helix and Grossmont and Steel Canyon play Valhalla and El Capitan. What I'm afraid of, and forgive me for being afraid of this, but I could see it being 35 or more points after 3 quarters, where you're going to have a lot of running clocks. And I'd rather see games that are competitive than that are put on the clock for the 4th quarter.
Well, and speaking with Conference Athletic Director Brian Wilbur, maybe less than a year ago, I believe that after this year there will be Valhalla going back to the Valley League. El Cap will stay with those big teams, so I know that's a little bit of balance there. Come back to us, right? But it just seems right now, especially if you look at the computer power ranking, Helix number 3, Steel Canyon number 6, Grossmont number 10, and of course Granite Hills number 15. Those are all Division 1 teams. Valhalla and El Cap are in Division 3, and given the circumstances this year, it's been a great year for Valhalla so far. A great start. So happy to see their program get back to winning again. But I'm not sure that either of those two teams. El Cap certainly doesn't look like it, but I'm not sure Valhalla will be promoted to Division II either. So that's a huge disparity between Division I and Division III. There might be a little more of an argument if either of those teams were in Division II, were strong enough to sustain the legacy ranking in Division II.
Exactly. And again, let's look at El Capitan, 0-4 by this week. And if El Capitan does not beat West Hills, I don't know who they'll beat on their schedule. Maybe Valhalla, probably not. And this is a team that's going to stay in that league next year. I understand several years ago, El Cap, we had a great run, went to the state finals, should have won that game, didn't. Those happen. But let's fit. When El Cap made that run to the state finals team, where were they? They were in elementary school. So are they supposed to pay the price now for something that happened there in elementary school? I think not. Come on, people, wake up. Let's get this thing fair out here in the Grossmont League. Like I say, let's get parity. You heard my 3 leagues of 4 teams. It's time to do it. I mean, it's like the one thing that bothers me, and this is maybe more not national politics, but it's political. Hey, I live in Alpine. 2004, 2008, we voted to have a high school up here. And that high school, they've never broken ground. They probably never will. I understand it went to court and lost. But here's the issue with that. The voters said, let's have a high school up there. But, of course, it doesn't matter about the voters. It matters about the politics. It kind of reminds me, as a matter of fact, when it got to the lawyers, it kind of reminds me of, if you remember Bum Phillips, the old Houston Oilers head football coach in the years when they were great. When it came to lawyers, I kind of saw where he was coming from. He said, you know what the definition of waste is? The definition of waste is an empty seat on a bus full of lawyers going over a cliff. And, when it comes to stuff like that, I get what he's saying. Why did it have to go to the lawyers that we don't have a high school at Alpine? And it shouldn't have to go to the lawyers on, the 3-4 team leagues. Let's just do what's right for East County. Let's make it even. Let's make it fair for everybody. Let's make it equitable. Enough of this. El Cap's a big school team, and we're going to put them in a league with Helix and Grossmont and Steel Canyon. Okay, we've seen that picture. Time to have a new movie. Thank you.
Steve, what's the state of affairs of our great game? I mean, you and I have been covering high school football for over 30 years, and we've seen a complete transition in the game. I understand the safety rules, and look, the game's not being played any differently necessarily, but the equipment's changed. Maybe the speed of it has changed a little bit, and the dangers because of research, maybe because of technology, those dangers have been brought to the forefront. Is there a future of high school football, considering the dwindling numbers? And look, I mean, we've already had a couple of teams having to forfeit this year, varsity teams with programs that have been around for 50 years.
Well, Ramon, that's a great question, because I know our good friend John Maffey, the San Diego Union Tribune, noted earlier this year how several schools have dropped junior varsity and more have dropped freshmen. And if you're dropping your freshman team, if you don't have a freshman team, how are you going to have a JV or varsity team when those guys go up? Yeah, I mean, there is an issue there with football. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of mothers and fathers too. Do you want your kid to play football? I mean, I've even heard guys who are ex-football players say, would I let my son play football? And no. I mean, it's scary. I mean, things have gotten a lot better. Rowan, I can remember a friend of mine up the street. He played for Santana in the late 1960s. Totally different mentality back then. Back then, he said, like, during practice, you didn't drink water, because if you drank water during practice, you weren't tough. But nowadays, it's just the opposite. Hey, let's hydrate like you're supposed to. I mean, there's a different mentality out there now, but it's also, things have changed too. It's also what you're coached to do. Kind of like, for instance, in Major League Baseball, I remember when Randy Jones pitched 25 complete games by himself in 1 year. You may not get 25 complete games in an entire Major League season, the 2,400 plus games in a year. So it's just a totally different mentality. And what's going to happen to high school football? It's going to be around for a while, but will it be around for a long while? It's a good question. There's also the CTE issue.
Yeah, and I think one thing we're seeing, you talk about, maybe it's at all levels too, because you really can see some crazy games and some crazy scores. And look, it seems like every week we're talking about new offensive records, but I kind of put that on the fact that when teams are practicing, they're only limited to, maybe 30 minutes of contact a couple of times a week. the most important thing about football is it's a tackling and blocking game, right? And learning how to tackle is really by repetition, because once you're wrapping up a guy, you grab a leg, you got to know how to, fold your arms through, secure the foot, things like that, that maybe just aren't getting enough attention in practice. And so it becomes that touch football that everybody's seeing. Once these speedsters get into the open, you're not able to make those open field tackles and stop those long plays.
Good point. I mean, it's not just at the high school level. Let's face it, Ramon. What was talked about so much in week 1 of the NFL season? How many missed tackles were there? I mean, because so many teams didn't play their regulars at all in the preseason, and they suffered because of it. I mean, you saw week 1 and even in week 2, tackling is just not there. I can remember when Marty Schottenheimer was coaching, the Chargers. First day of practice, you always had this thing called the Oklahoma drill, where you would have, you'd have on this side, you'd have a blocker and a running back, and on this side you would have a defensive player, and the blocker would block the defensive player, and the running back would come in, and you'd have 3 people with contact. You can't do that now. And again, I get it, the things are changing and all, but I think, again, tackling's not top. That's why you're seeing Grossmont get almost 800 yards in one game, and then a week later they're being broken. That's why you're seeing El Capitan score 52 points and lose by 8. Because people just, it's not so much that they're not taught to tackle anymore, but you can't teach them to tackle because you can't take the time to teach them to tackle. Yeah, it's an issue.
It's a different game. It's a different game, and I hope you still love it. Obviously you do.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Just so you know, personally, I do statistics with Fox Sports San Diego. And we have, one more homestand with the Padres. And then after that, we'll be doing 97.3 The Fan, which is the Padres station. As soon as the Padres are over, all the games go on there on Friday nights. I know we're going to be out in East County several times. And, we're going to be all over the county, going to be there through the playoffs. But, again, going back to Ramon, what we talked about in the beginning, I think going through the playoffs, we're going to see a lot of East County teams. Last year was interesting because for the first time in forever, City League teams were winning all the championships. And this year, looks like some Grossmont League teams will. I know it's early, but don't be surprised if teams like Helix, like Steel Canyon, like Grossmont, and maybe even others at the lower division, Santana, who knows, see if teams don't make a run this year.
Sure. I'll give you that one right now. Santana, they're the top-ranked team in Division 4, Steve, and they're playing an undefeated team this week at Montgomery. Those are the top 2 teams right now in Division 4, so it's kind of a championship preview. And I think if one thing that we've gotten right in this whole situation, granted, the disparity we talked about is a concern, but the structure of the divisions and making different championships, I think it's fun for everyone, and it creates great games. And the coaches, the programs have actually done a great job. Maybe it's just the way it's worked out, but when they schedule their non-league games, a lot of times most of the time, they've looked for games, they've kind of partitioned themselves out, they're scheduling games with teams in their own division. That makes these non-league games just important as the league games, because when you play these non-league teams, you're battling for playoff position. These games, yes, you want to win a league championship for community pride, civic pride, and school pride, and you're competing against all your little regional teams out here in our conference, of course. But when they're competing in those non-league games, almost every game is important. So I think that's, if anything, we can kind of wrap up our first DOLAN'S dugout with going back to what you said about the rest of the season. You mentioned the East County teams on 97.3 The Fan with you and Coach and Braden. We've already had Granite. We had the Helix game on last week. And moving forward this Friday, Helix and the Saints. I'm going to pin you down, Steve, if you'll do me the honor and tell me how you personally voted in the poll. I did also vote for Helix number 1. I voted for Cathedral number 2 and Saints number 3, but I think it's interesting how the poll came out with the 31 voters. Helix only had 14 first-place votes. Saints had 16 first-place votes. Now, I'm sure a lot of them said, Saints are undefeated, so they deserve to be number 1. But Helix just beat the 9th-ranked team in the country, and to me,
Mhm.
that allowed them. I had Helix third before that to supersede over Saints. But so the fact that Helix had 14 first place and Saints had 16 first place shows me that people either voted Saints number 1 or Saints number 3.
That's true, but the old cliche, Ramon. To be the best, you have to beat the best. Helix beat the best, but for the Saints this week to be the best, they have to beat the best, and right now that's Helix. So I think it's interesting how that Helix Saints thing is right now. But I'll put it this way: come next Monday, or when we all vote Saturday over the weekend, whatever, there's going to be no question who's number one because it's going to be decided on the field. And that's the way it should be. I like that.
Right, and polls, everyone's going to say, polls are polls and you play it on the field, but unfortunately in football, now these teams are all playing each other, but in football you just don't play enough games. That's why we like to have polls so we can compare these things, but Saints doesn't have to worry. In fact, you might just call them co-number ones because the points came down, and that's a 10-9-8 point system. It was Helix 292 and Saints 290, so there's no difference there.
Yeah, 2 points with 31 people voting, that's nothing. But again, I'd be curious to see what happens on the field this week. The warning for Helix, though, is don't have a letdown like Cathedral did against you. Keep up those special teams. Obviously Noah had a great game, 193 total yards, 3 touchdowns. And as they say, Trailer on the first play of the game, 62 yards. Washington's 93-yard kickoff return set up a big score when Cathedral was coming back. Keep up those big plays because that's the thing. It's funny because we were talking about this after the game. If you just looked at the raw numbers, the raw statistics, they were pretty even. But what did Helix do more than Cathedral? Helix made the big plays on offense, the big plays on defense, and especially on special teams. Maybe not every play, but the biggest plays of the games belong to Helix. And that's why Helix is number one in the county, arguably, right now.
Yeah, they both ended up with about 380 yards of total offense. So just one other thing, I'll let you go, Steve, and hopefully you'll be with me. I want to, now that we got the Padres season over, unfortunately, almost, we're going to get to pin you down hopefully each week. But just want to get your assessment. Delshawn Traylor tweeted out yesterday that he wanted everyone to stop asking him about why he's not the quarterback. Well, he's still the quarterback of the Highlanders, maybe the co-quarterback with Cameron Brown. There's no problem there, but what about Cameron Brown moving forward as the Helix quarterback? What do you think? Maybe it's unorthodox. He's just fast, shifty, but he throws kind of a neat ball for a left-handed quarterback with a pretty deft touch.
Well, I think, left-handed quarterbacks, unique. People aren't using that because you're going after the guy that's throwing like this, and all of a sudden we show him this hand, you're not ready for it. But you know what? My opinion is, and boy, I hate to be cliche-ish, but in that case, let the coaches answer. They just beat the number 9 team in the nation. What they're doing is working. So, if Helix had gotten beat in that game and they're 1-2 and they're down 7 in the poll, okay, then you can ask questions. But you know what? They beat one of the top 10 teams in the nation. So then keep doing what you're doing and just take it easy on my El Capitan Vaqueros when you play them in a few weeks.
And Steve, how did you said you voted Helix number 1? Did you have? You said Helix, Cathedral, Saints was your top 3 in that order?
Yeah, I actually had the Saints number 2 and Cathedral number 3. The reason I kept Saints in number 2, they won 62-0 last week. And again, I just thought that, they are undefeated. Helix and Cathedral both have 1 loss, but again, the head-to-head to me decided that. It's really subjective too, Ramon, because one thing John Maffey of the Union Tribune, who runs the poll, and I have talked about, the first 3 or 4 weeks are really tough, not because of when our teams play our teams, but when our teams go and play a San Clemente or teams up in Orange County or LA, how do you judge that? There's some years where we'll have a team that'll be 0-3 in the county. I think of like Mission Hills last year, got off to a horrible start playing teams elsewhere. And then in the end, they were pretty darn good in the playoffs. It's just really hard to tell the first 3 or 4 weeks because, again, it's kind of like some of our teams are playing out of the area in those games. How do you judge them? I don't know. You just kind of got to go with a gut feeling. Like Lincoln this week lost in San Clemente. And Lincoln, I voted them number 7. John Maffey told me, he saw Lincoln play El Camino, and had El Camino not fumbled at the end of the game, El Camino would have upset Lincoln. So you look at a team like Lincoln, I've got them number 7, and that's where they're on the poll. You don't know because, again, They had a little bit of luck to beat a San Diego County team, and then they lost an out-of-town team. When we find out about Lincoln, when they start playing the San Diego teams, and unfortunately, I think Cathedral Catholic's on their schedule. Anybody from here on out, except for St. Augustine, that has Cathedral Catholic on their schedule, look out.
Steve, just real quick, I guess we have a half-hour show, but there's one more question. Then you brought up Lincoln. I just wanted to get this is a social show, kind of, with your experience in prep football and all sports. I just want to get your take on the Lincoln situation this past week. It's kind of crept up into the A1 section of the newspaper, and their situation at San Clemente this week.
Not good. That stuff needs to go by the wayside, calling them names and all. I mean, you need to respect other people. I remember when I was at El Capitan in 1971, Lincoln came out and beat the heck out of us with a guy named Wally Henry, who went on to UCLA. He was a great player. And, we respected them. We respected the fact, I remember the song I was taught when I was a little kid in church, red, yellow, black, and white, they are precious in his sight. Never think you're better than somebody else because of the color of your skin versus the color of their skin. And never think that anybody else is superior to you because of the color of your skin. I'm of that belief that God created all men equal, and that's where it needs to stay.
Yeah, crazy. Can't believe racism sometimes. I mean, something that was determined by the nature of the creation of the earth and where people are positioned in their ancestry, that people would hold biases against such a thing. It just seems so outrageous. So I think that's a great note to leave us on, Steve. Thank you so much. I thought it was a wonderful half hour. I mean, we obviously could talk for quite a long time, and I'm sure we will in the weeks and months to come. Steve Dolan's Dugout. We're right here in the dugout, kind of at Petco Park, where you hang out, Steve.
Well, thanks so much, Ramon, and all I can say is go East County.
All right, Dolan's Dugout. Hopefully each week, but you're going to see it right here on EastCountySports.com. Thanks a lot, Steve. I'm Ramon Scott. Thank you for joining us.
Have a good day.